Okay, so I've got some new shiny details on Ripout because they've put a new trailer out there. If you haven't watched my previous video and you can't be asked to go back to it, then here is a bit of a flash update for you. It is an online co-op FPS horror shooter. You go into this ship with your mates, there's all sorts of mutants all over the place, and it's up to you to gun everything down, collect loot, and move through until you finish. If you think it's a little bit generic and well done, why are you telling me about this? Because this is nothing new and interesting. There are a couple of things that make it a little bit different from things that you may have seen before. The first thing is that you have a pet gun. It allows you to fire the enemy, and then you can then harness whatever abilities they have, and you can turn it against them. The second is that they have this concept of reconfigurable monsters. And this whole concept revolves around the idea that basically smaller monsters can get together, or bigger monsters with smaller monsters, and reconfigure themselves to make themselves stronger. So hopefully you end up with a scenario where you'll be fighting different types of monsters with different types of abilities, and each playthrough will be a little bit different. Alongside this, there are procedurally generated levels, so each playthrough will be a little bit different each time. The difficulty also scales depending on how many players you have in your group, so the bigger the group, the more monsters and harder they will be to kill. And if you're wondering how long each level takes, it's roughly between 10 and 20 minutes, so it is fairly pick up and play. Now, there are some generic kind of things, but I think they're always worth mentioning. There is weapon customizations, and there's also character customizations, meaning that you can tailor your playstyle around how you actually want to go about the game. Now, in terms of new stuff, what we've actually been given is a trailer of some of the gameplay, and you get a rough idea of how the atmosphere feels and what's going on in terms of enemies, and also how their mutations work. In terms of stylism and feel, if you've ever played Natural Selection or Natural Selection 2, then it's very, very similar to that. Long dark corridors with low ambient orange hues create a real nasty, glowy kind of evil mutated feel to it. It's also got massive vibes of John Carpenter's The Thing, alongside some small elements of the Doom franchise. You'll be pleased to hear there's also confirmation of a huge range of weapons. There's flamethrowers, there's rockets, there's machine guns, and even though you don't get to see the customizations directly, you do get to see them swapping about, and there seems to be a broad range of them. That being said, as I've mentioned before, the gun elements aren't the things that we're writing home about. It's the very unique monster customization that goes throughout the game. And you can see examples of the mutants linking together, creating all sorts of funky looking hybrid monsters. The kind of monster that looks like it was never actually meant to be built like that, but still works in that horrific horror vibe fashion. Even though the gameplay looks very tunnel-like in fashion, the atmosphere looks really awesome. They've given you just enough light to see where you're going, but not enough to see all the enemies lurking around every corner. In terms of actual planned release dates, there's still nothing confirmed yet. We know that it's coming out in 2022. If you want to know more about them, look up their publisher 3D Realms or the developer team, which is Pet Project Games. In terms of consoles, it is coming out on PC. You can find it on Steam. Additionally, you can also check it out on the PS5 and Xbox when it finally gets released. Now, the last thing, I haven't heard this is coming out on early access or any other nonsense like that. So when it finally does come out, we can actually expect a final release. When I know more, I will give you more details. We are trying to secure a key at the moment so we can do some early access reviews for you to have a gander at. But until then, I will just give you any updates that I find floating around the ether of the internet. Anyway, until then, have a great week everyone, and I'll be back with more news and reviews soon.